How y'all doing, family? I'm gonna be doing two videos on black treatment um from drugs, and then I'm gonna do another video on white treatment from drugs. So they have this article, say the morning call, say law treated black crack addicts more severely than today's heroin offenders. So I'll play this video for y'all right quick.
you know, it didn't set in, like it didn't really register until the sheriffs transported me to Muncie. And I remember when I pulled up to Muncie, it was dark and there was this huge dark cloud over like the whole prison. And it was old and it was cold, like you could just feel all of this around you. And I knew that I was going into a dark place. You could feel it instantly, and I hadn't even stepped out the car yet. And that right there, it was scary. It was scary to be so young, and you see a lot of things happen in prison. Um, that it changes you. It changes who you are. Like I was saying, even if you don't want to change, prison is going to make you come home a different person. It could be for the better and it could be for the worse. Just running constantly. Constantly running, selling drugs, just hustling in the streets, just hustling. That was just my lifestyle every day. Everything else came second. At that stage in my life, the consequences were so far and not that important, until I had to live them. Then, consequences become your reality. I experienced heavy postpartum because I had left the baby. She was only 3 months old when I left. So I would say for probably about the first year, maybe 15 months, I was extremely depressed. So I couldn't feel anything but depression. And I was on medication for the postpartum. After I got off the medication and I began to feel again and think again, because the medications, it sedates you so heavily you don't feel anything. Reality that I was going away for a long, long time had set in. And I knew then something just clicked, like this has to stop. It's over. I'm never going back to prison again. I need to make some changes. And my first thought was, when I get home, I'm going to do all I can just to be a better person.
Okay, family, that was Lola Bivens, who used to deal cocaine, talk about her life. So we're gonna get into this article. This article came out on December 3rd, 2016, by Riley Yates and Steve Izak. Okay, contact reporters. Okay, I'm about to get into this article, family. It said when Leola Bivens was first sent away for dealing drugs, she was a 22-year-old high school dropout with a 2-year-old daughter at home. Addiction was the center of the life she knew in East Stroudsburg, where she was born and raised. She recalled recently Bivens' mother was a heroin addict. She eventually died of an overdose, and seemingly everyone around her was either selling drugs or abusing them, Vivian said. That was nearly 20 years ago, and a drug scare was sweeping Pennsylvania and the nations, prompting pledges by lawmakers to be back the scourge. But it's if today heroin epidemic has brought calls for better treatment and more compassion, the mid 1980s to the late 1990s crack cocaine epidemic prompted a very different response lock them up, and throw away the key. Bivens experienced that firsthand, spending 9.5 years in state and federal prison for selling cocaine and crack. Now she's 41. She has turned her life around. She holds a bachelor's degree and hopes to get her master's, and she works as a counselor for at-risk girls at the Northampton County Juvenile Justice Center in Easton. Okay, that's Leola Bivens. And said, I don't think I was treated fairly in the beginning. Bivens said, I was young. I didn't have any education. I needed treatment. To backers, the war on drugs of the 80s and the 90s was needed medicine at the time when society ills. Violent crime, the rise of gangs required quarantine, but to a groaning number of critics, the effort was the best misguided and at worst devastating to the communities and affected, which were disproportionately inner city and black Hispanic. Because that's what they do, family, in the 1980s and the 90s. And still to this day, even if somebody gets stopped with, a black person gets stopped with either heroin or weed, we get locked up at a disproportionate rate. But when white people do the same thing, they do the same thing. They do it even more, but we still get punished 10 times worse than them. Okay, and it says, today, even some of its worst vocal supporters have abandoned the Get Tough measures as ineffective and draconian. But taxpayers continue to grapple with the effects, until which Pennsylvania built and renovated 20 state prisons since the mid 1980s, as its inmate population more than tripled to 49,561, and its correction budget more than doubled to 2.2 billion. State corrections department records show. The same is true at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, where the number of inmates has grown more than fourfold since 1986 to 191,024, nearly half of whom who are in for drug offenses. This year, taxpayers will spend 7.5 billion for it, more than 12 times higher than the cost 3 decades ago. Yeah, because now they're locking up people even more, way more, just for little small things, especially us. We did a lot of damage to the African American community with the approach, said State Senator Stuart Greenleaf. You think? You think? This is 2018, February 3rd. This motherfucker, let me read this shit again, family. It said, we did a lot of damage to the African American community with that approach. Oh, now y'all finally understand what y'all did, and y'all still continually to do. Still continue to do, but don't give a fuck about it. You ain't trying to release nobody out of prison, in jail and stuff like that. Y'all gonna keep doing it so y'all can get money. And it said Republican Montgomery, the longtime chairman of the Judicial Committee, who was once one of the champions of the state tough on crime laws. We thought they were good policies. Yeah, you thought it was good policies because you was locking up a lot of black people. That's what you thought. You was locking up a lot of black people, and that was y'all motive to kill us and stuff like that, and what you still continue to do. Greenleaf said, to some degree they were, but we never calculated the unintended consequences. Yeah, because y'all wasn't worried about that because it wasn't y'all people. You don't give a fuck about nobody else until when y'all people start getting hit, like y'all getting hit on the opioid epidemic. They're going to say at the state level, many of those laws are now vestiges of the past. almost all of Pennsylvania's mandatory minimum sentence for drugs, which tied judges' hands for forcing them to impose strict prison terms, have been thrown out by the courts under a string of rulings that found them unconstitutional. We've been knew it was unconstitutional, but they didn't give a damn. Everybody was all the white people that control the judges and the prosecution and stuff like that, state attorney, judges, officials and stuff like that. They was all for it because it wasn't their people. They didn't give a fuck about black people. And the legislature so far has been unwilling to reinstate them. Let y'all check out this video, family.
Secretary Wetzel, can you tell me from your perspective, what is the main difference you see between the Get Tough on Crime stuff from the 80s and 90s to today?
One, I'd like to think that we learned from the bad decisions out of the Get Tough on Crime era. Specifically, that we can't paint with a broad brush. And when we over-incarcerate, we actually, in some cases, create more crime. I also think that the Get Tough on Crime era, one of the key weaknesses of that era was not trying to understand what the root cause of the crime was. And in this case, clearly a lot of the crime is driven by addiction, and so addressing addiction has to be part of that response.
Okay. That was John Wetzel. He talked about lesson learned from the nation's crack epidemic in the 1980s and 90s, which led to a mass incarceration levels at its state and federal prison as Pennsylvania grapples with heroin prescription opioid crisis. And it said at the federal level, sentencing guidelines for drug trafficking have been scaled back. Yeah, it's been scaled back because it's a lot of white people getting hit on a fucking opioid epidemic, and now Trump coming out talking about, oh, we don't want to jail them and shit like that. But bitch, you fucking jail all us in the 1980s and 90s and shit like that. You don't want to jail them because you already know that y'all getting hit hard on that shit, and it's gonna continue to hit the fucking white people. Let me get back to the story, y'all. Sorry about that. But it said at the federal level, sentence guidelines for drug trafficking have been scaled back, and the Justice Department under Democratic President Obama less aggressively sought harsh punishment for drug dealing. At the same time, Obama used his clemency powers on behalf of drug offenders serving lengthy sentences, releasing more federal prisoners than any president since Lyndon Johnson. Obama has given communications to 1,023 inmates, most of whom were serving decades, in many cases life, for selling drugs. Among them were 26 prisoners for Pennsylvania, including 13 from Philadelphia and 1 from Reading. But while those initiatives have enjoyed bipartisan support, how they will fare under the Republican administration of President Donald Trump is an open question. Yeah, because he ain't doing a motherfucking thing. He don't give a damn about nobody. He only care about his rich fucking donors, the rich white people. He don't give a fuck about nobody. When he publicized that the opioid epidemic was a national state emergency, okay, they said, okay, well, they said they needed assistance, and they not getting assistance because President Donald Trump don't give a fuck about nobody. He gonna let them white junkies die, and they gonna keep continue to die. Rich white opioid epidemics, they gonna continue to die because they are addicted to it. They're addicted to it. So keep going on with it, y'all. Says during the campaign, Trump pledged to be the law and order candidate and complained that violent crime is out of control, though he offered few specific policy proposals. His choice for Attorney General, Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions, one of the most racist fucking people in the world, has been a vocal backer of harsh sentences for drug offenses with the Drug Policy Alliance, a reform group labeled him as a drug war dinosaur. Yeah, they wanna scale back on that, but white people still getting off with this shit. They don't have to go to jail, so now all they got to do is continue doing the same fucking thing, getting high and shit like that, and wasting taxpayers' money just for them to get fucking well. But they didn't do a damn thing for the crack and heroin epidemic in the 1980s and 90s. They just fucking locked us up and say throw away the key. States don't want to spend money on prisons. Sessions acknowledges that last year in opposing changes in national drug policies. But the truth is that people who tend to be criminals tend to continue to be criminals and commit crimes, and we ignore too often. We ignore too often the pain, the destruction, the damage it does to innocent people who are afraid to have their children out and who suffer through the turmoil of being a crime victim. Despite Sessions' recent statements, former Republican Governor Tom Corbett doesn't believe he will seek to turn back the clock on drug enforcement. Corbett got to know Sessions while both served as U.S. attorneys and state attorneys general in the 1980s and 90s. They don't give a damn. They only care about their own fucking people. Lock them up and throw away the key. That was in the 90s, said Corbett, who soon will be working on a National Government Association grant-funded project to develop nationwide justice reform guidelines. Why is he on the fucking National Government Association grant-funded project to develop nationwide justice reform guide? Why is he on that? This was the same fucking man that was talking about lock him up and throw away the key. And now you're gonna come up and try to do something. Come on, man. Get out of here with that shit. Trump's and Sessions' comments also do not bother State Correction Secretary John Whitzel, hired by Corbett in 2011 and retained by Democratic Governor Tom Wolf. There are enough conservative lawmakers embracing criminal justice reform due to cost overruns and the impact on families to offset possible plans by the incoming administration to spend more on prisons. Whitzel said, "It's easy when you are outside of the system to make these broad, sweeping statements," he said, but Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions are going to inherit a federal system that bloated and that over-incarcerates non-violent individuals. Catching too many fish. The crack cocaine epidemic started in the mid-1980s and was fueled in part by a media frenzy that overstated the scope of drug use and violence that was occurring in inner cities, said Steve Bielenko, a Temple University criminal justice professor who has written a book on the New Era response. So, family, I'm just coming to you on how we was treated and continually to be treated in this government system when we do things and when white people do things. So now they want to make sure that they white counterparts and stuff like that, they want to make sure that they don't go to jail and stuff like this and everything, because they know what they did in 1980s and 90s when they locked up all our black families up and our black royals, that they didn't give a fuck, and that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to do that. And they see that it's gonna hurt them in the long run, and they don't want to do it anymore. But it's pretty strange how shit flipped around and turned around. The Most High got our back, and he's making sure that it's hitting them hard now. So, family, I want y'all to have a good day and a good evening.